Serious, people who disappeared to start a new life. What is your story? Currently disappearing. Got bored in the USA, so I looked around for jobs on boats, yachts. I went from alcoholic construction worker to currently a deckhand on a private yacht circumnavigating the globe. We're currently on our way to Tahiti and I'm excited. Tahiti is a magical place. I didn't really disappear. I just flew from UK to Canada and didn't tell anyone until after. I wanted a bit of time to make my mind up about what I was doing without any random emotional crap getting in the way. My friends assumed I'd just fricked off somewhere, as it wasn't that uncommon for me to do. Told most people where I was after about a month, and 6 years later I'm still here. Father started dating a new woman and suddenly became a massive pose. Emotional and verbal abuse. Gaslighting, guilting me out of money by saying he couldn't make bills, but then turning around and buying alcohol and new gadgets. The works. I was stomaching it pretty well until it started to spread to my then 1.5-year-old son. There was one and only one incident of him going after my baby, and the very next day I was loading up a moving truck headed several states away. Thankfully I had made a good friend via an online game who opened up his home to us if we needed to escape. Changed my number and haven't heard from my father or his GF since, though I was warned by the town sheriff that a man had been calling the police station asking about a girl from out of state that has recently moved into town. He saw my license plate and made the connection. I'll burn that bridge when I get to it. I'll burn that bridge when I get to it. Words to live by, truly. 19 years old. Parents kicked me out a million times. Got a place. Got a boyfriend. Boyfriend goes nuts, moves in without asking and treats me as his property. Controls every aspect of my life. He would take my grocery receipts to see what time I checked out and compare the amount of time Google Maps said it should to get to and from the store. If it was too much time, I'd get screamed at all night. He would break my stuff. Ripped posters. I owned everything in my place, so everything was used against me. He accused me of cheating all the time, but the password on my phone was set by him and he went through it whenever he wanted. He wouldn't let me see my brother because he was gay, or my dad because he knew my ex was lying about his military service to get pain pills. Dad works at the VA my ex was claiming disability from. The nightmare and emotional and physical abuse went on for 2.5 years before I had enough. I let him live with me for a few months to get on his feet. The day I told him to leave, he calmly brought my phone to me and said, "You need to call some people, because I'm going to kill you today." A few months before, he went into a rage one night and dragged me into a dark alley behind my apartment. He put a blanket around my shoulders and a gun to my head, so I believed him. He was walking around my yard and inside my apartment. I hid in the bathroom. He kept saying, "I'm going to kill her. She's going to die. This is his. She can't do this. I'm going to kill her." I texted his best friend and told him I was scared. His best friend brought 3 huge dudes over and got him out of my house. Not before he broke his hand putting in through my wall and told me I was next. He kept coming to my place and knocking on my door. I had a friend over once and went crazy, tried to push himself into my apartment. He'd mow my lawn and got furious when I told him to stop. He wouldn't let me leave, so I packed up everything and moved to the next state over. I've completely restarted my life with the only connection to that state being my dad. I'm still scared he'll come find me. I've been saving up for a while to move back east where home is, but things got much better for me. What a freaking maniac. So sorry you experienced such a lunatic. Basic breakup story, I guess. I was in my early 20s and I'd been in a pretty lousy relationship for a few years, only really lousy the last 1.5 years. I'd done a lot to try and make the relationship work, and it meant I was basically living paycheck to paycheck, working a lot of overtime at a bar. Then in the space of a few months, both my aunt died of cancer. That was kind of expected, and a family friend died suddenly, so I got in a worse place mentally and didn't have much left to put into the relationship. I was still working a lot of hours to pay our rent, but when I got home I was pretty depressed. My girlfriend was probably already pretty checked out, I guess, because she cheated pretty soon with a guy in our friendship group. And of course that ended our relationship pretty suddenly. I moved in with 2 friends and she moved back to her parents. I felt like I needed a change of scene, so just started applying for jobs with loads of holiday companies and got an interview with a ferry company. By the time that came up, I was starting to move on with my life and wasn't so sure about leaving. Then I found out my ex had slept with or hit on pretty much all of my mates since we'd broken up, and I decided to get out of Dodge. I never actually meant to leave and not come back or go dark or whatever. I just took the job. Spent a summer working on ferries to clear my head with new people out of all that craziness and went from there. Spent a couple of years working holiday seasons and traveling, and then settled into a job and a routine elsewhere. Never looked back. Highly abusive family. Grew up surprisingly well but absolutely bombed out of life when I turned 18. Multiple serious suicide attempts and months in hospitals. Finally got the guts up and saved a scant of money to change my name and get out of the state I lived in. Still struggling a lot, and I'll live in constant fear that someone will find me, but I can live a half decent life now. Still lots of psychological issues as a result of long-term traumas, but I'm on my own now and it's the biggest relief. Proud of you. Nothing dramatic. I left home at 16 homeless for a few months. Lived with a GF's family for a couple of years. Mum told family that I'd stolen money, so they cut all ties with me. I hadn't. My mum's an ass. I stopped contacting friends because I was dirt poor and couldn't afford a phone. 3 years after I left, I started using my first name. In Muslim culture, every guy is bloody named Muhammad, so we used my middle name for my early life. I moved to a new town newly single, got my dream job and made new friends. Got in touch with the old ones and got on with my new life. I put up with years of abuse from my ex. It was a textbook case. He isolated me from my family friends, was super controlling, emotionally, verbally and physically abusive. He became an addict over the years and would blame me for not being able to stop him. I worked full time to support us and he would steal our rent money for drugs, confess to me, cry and promise to change, and then the whole cycle would start the next day. He was charismatic in front of other people and was so good at making me come off as the crazy girlfriend. He'd threatened to kill himself if I ever left. He said if I broke up with him, he would kill me, the baby, and then himself. When I pointed out how psychotic that was, he said he didn't care. It was the truth. Then he actually hurt my son. I could handle the abuse. I was used to it, but him hurting the baby because he was crying was the final straw for me. I was numb to him after many years, but I finally broke. I packed a few things under the guise of going to visit someone, but in reality, I flew across the country and never looked back. I had to leave so many treasured things behind to make it seem like I was coming back. I moved with the baby and a suitcase and spent the next 9 years building a new life. Things are amazing now though. I have a fantastic partner who is an amazing father to my son. I have a lot of friends, a great support system, and no longer living in fear. You're such an amazing mom. My mom was in your spot and she chose her boyfriend over me, so I grew up with that. And it's terrible because she still lives that life, but I can't help her because it's her choice to live that life. I can't have anything to do with her BC, he controls her. If he died and she came on my doorstep, I'd shut the door. Had an abusive family. Mom moved us out of our paid off house into a home her CKED real estate agent convinced her to buy, and she ended up not being able to afford it. She ends up marrying the CKED. He takes a crap ton of her money and then ends up in prison with kidney failure. Eventually they divorce, but now mom is screwed, so she really starts putting the pressure on all the kids to help financially support her. I am 18 at this point and trying to work full time and go to school, but had severe anxiety and depression, so I ended up dropping out of college and having to pay back a $3,000 student loan. I end up working dead-end serving jobs until and becoming an alcoholic. I eventually meet a guy and he seems great, and my mom tells him, while I'm not even around, he should move in with us. He seemed to have a lot in common with me and he really did seem like a great guy and was well liked by everyone, and so after a few more weeks he moved in. He found out about a week later he was cheating on me, and he had done it literally the day we moved in together. Mom didn't want him to move out because she said she needed the rent. I tried to work it out with him, but eventually I was so depressed and emotionally drained from living with him, my mom, and my brother, who kept stealing my car when I was sleeping and has severe anger issues, that I went to visit a childhood friend in a different state and just never came back. I eventually met my fiance and now I start college in less than 2 weeks. I have no regrets about moving. You absolutely made the right decision. Best of luck with school. I grew up in a tiny semi-isolated American town I'm going to refer to as heck. I hated the fricking place. I was bullied from the minute we moved there until the minute I left. I was above the level of the high school classes by my freshman year. But isolated. No other school. I've got no issue with my parents, but the majority of my extended family is extremely homophobic and would probably disown me if they didn't depend on my dad for money. I'd attempted suicide and I was basically just trying to hold it together until I graduated. When I was 15, I applied to be a foreign exchange student, basically just out of desperation to get out of heck. Left a few days after I turned 16. I was popular in my new school. I was much less of an angry person when I wasn't getting screamed at all day 5 days a week. Go frickin' figure. It was just so much better. I was doing college applications by the end of my year there and just realized there was no way I could ever go back. I ended up going to the UK to study law. I was still getting harassed online by people from heck, so I started going by my middle name. I'm doing alright now though. I guess I didn't truly disappear because some people know where I am, but I'd basically started over twice in 2 different countries by the time I turned 18. I have trouble with the idea of staying in one place and my mom has to talk me out of moving every time things don't go perfectly smoothly, but I'm sure I'm a lot better of a person than I would have been if I'd stayed. When my sister and I were young, my mom was engaged to an abusive man. One morning she dropped us off at school and said this would be our last day. Make sure you say goodbye to your friends. When she picked us up from school, we went directly to the airport and flew to California to live with some family. At the time we'd been living in Michigan. We've never heard from the butthole since. Good for your mom. Glad she had the strength to do that and get you all out of harm's way. My boyfriend and I were really bad H addicts. He had gone to rehab and was getting clean when I overdosed. My heart stopped. I still have real memory problems to this day. He came right home, and of curry we kept using. We lived with my parents, and we literally packed everything up and moved. 3 years later we have a baby and are on methadone at a clinic, but almost out. I have 3 weeks left, and now are doing really well. I didn't talk to my friends or tell them, because they all were really bad on it and using stealing from me. Finally I talked to them about 5 months ago and they told me the rumor was that I died of an overdose and that my boyfriend was in prison on drug charges and that my parents just moved to the neighboring city. Without warning I left for the West Coast. $40 a bag of clothes and a laptop. Found a job in 1 week doing tech support. It sucked but the bonus pay came to around $1,500 every 2 weeks. And having roommates only needing $300 for rent made it nice. Changed jobs, moved around a couple places in the region, and it's better than Midwest. What sucks is I don't have many friends. Back east I could plan something and go out with any number of people for drinks, dinner, concerts, camping. Out here, 3 years later I don't know but 3 people. Dating sucks. Going to bars solo feels weird. Oregon is okay but IDK if it's what I'm looking for. Get involved in some volunteer organizations or join an adult sports team like kickball. It'll be a good way to meet new people. Throwaway time. 15 years ago I was heavy drug user. I was 25 back then and before using drugs I had a good job and I was being paid good. My so-called best friend introduced me to drugs and while at first I was hesitant to use them, I thought what the heck. What's the worst that can happen? Needless to say I started using more and I was spending a few thousand every week on drugs. I started showing less for work until eventually I was fired. I had some money saved up so I wasn't too worried first until my addiction took most of that money. Since I always used the same dealer and had already gave him thousands of pesos, he told me I had good credit with him and he would give me some drugs but I had to pay him every week. So we did that and it worked for a while until I couldn't pay him every week. I started owing him more and more until eventually he told me he couldn't give me any more until I had money on me and could pay him. So one day I was really desperate and broke into his house late at night. I knew he had guns so I was very careful not to wake him up when I was breaking in. Once inside, I grabbed a baseball bat he had and started beating him with it. I left him in pretty bad shape and took his money and some drugs I found. At the time I didn't know he was with a cartel, so I pretty much stole from the cartel. They started looking for me and word on the street was that they wanted to kill me. So with the money I stole from the dealer, I decided the best thing to do was to run away to the US. I didn't tell anybody. I decided to travel to the Tijuana and find a coyote there who could pass me. 7 days later I was already in the US. I left everything back home. My family, friends, memories, but most important, my addiction. When I made the choice to leave the country, I told myself I wasn't gonna do drugs again since my life got out of control since I started using drugs. So yeah, it's been 15 years clean. I have an okay job and a great family here. I'm probably a wanted man by the cartel back in Mexico. They probably all dead now anyway. New younger guys in charge. TLDR. Of the backstory: mentally, physically, emotionally abusive father, possibly narcissistic mother with her own issues, 7 other full siblings, 17 of us in all, halves and steps included, child services involvement in and out between 1999 and 2014, death of a younger sibling. While most of this was going on, starting in 2012, I started talking to this girl on Facebook. She was on the literal opposite side of the earth. Me being in Florida and her being in the Philippines. So all we could do is chat on Facebook and Skype sometimes. We eventually found feelings for each other and agreed to try the world's largest possible LDR. We had many dates where we talk on Skype and watch anime movies together. And we'd just talk about whatever was going on in our lives at that time. I was 14 when it started. She was 16. So I mean, I'm sure you all know what kind of messages were sent along the way. Anyways, when I turned 18, I had a job at a Kia dealership, managing our puny file room and trying to save up as much money as possible. Had a super bad incident with my brother and mom, where they tried to frame me as an abuser like my father. They had me arrested, and thank God the judge I saw the next day saw through their balls. That's a bit more of a story than I'm willing to type right now, but I might add more later to it if people are interested. I was let out the next day, banned from returning to the only home I'd known, and had nowhere to go. I couch surfed for a bit and finally said frick it. Frick my mind-numbing job. Frick my family. Frick Florida. I'm out. So I bought a passport, my visas, got my paperwork in order, and flew to the Philippines. More scary experiences during the move, but again, another decent story for another time. This might be long enough, lol. So now here I am, sitting in the same room with the love of my life, going strong for 6 years, engaged. I don't talk with my family anymore, and I've found a better one here. I wish I could get into all of the details in this one post, but I'm a little scared it'll get too long, so if anyone wants bonus details, feel free to ask for specifics. I would like to hear your story, if you're up to telling it. When I was younger, I was abused by my stepfather, and my mom practically did nothing. My biological dad abandoned me and my brother. So when I was 16, I moved out to a friend's place. When I was 18, I moved out and moved to Texas, originally from NC, and have been here since. I didn't disappear in terms of changing my identity or am doing anything secret, but I did disappear from everyone I knew from back home fairly suddenly. I grew up in a medium-sized town in Canada, a fairly laid-back city with a good university culture but not much to do in terms of anything else. I got sick of the cold winters, sick of the lack of culture, sick of the social negativity, sick of the lack of opportunity. Youth under unemployment is a serious thing in Canada, etc. Decided to move to Paris. Enrolled in a prestigious business school and got in. Within a month I said goodbye to friends, packed up my crap and got the heck out. I've lived in Paris, Milan, and parts of UK for the past 5 years and loving it. I'm making great money, and because the pound symbol and euro is so high compared to the tanking Canadian dollar, I can make investments back in Canada fairly easily. My life is completely different compared to my life in Canada. I can travel to cool European cities very cheaply, enjoy interesting conversation with people from around the world, enjoy mild winters, and a positive social environment where people root for each other. One of the things I didn't like about living in Canada is that it was normal for people to try and tear each other down and talk behind people's back. I don't experience that here. Abusive parents, like a few others had stated. I remember thinking at 8 years old how I longed to be 18, then I could leave and never see them again. I finally left at 19 with a rucksack of belongings. I did go back a few months later to collect the rest of my belongings, namely my massive CD collection. I learned they'd bagged my belongings up shortly after I left and dumped my entire life at the city dump. It was that gesture that showed me exactly how much my own family valued me, and I decided from that I would never see them again. And I didn't. My mother will occasionally send me a friend request or will like a status, but she's never actually sent a message of apology. I did try to reconcile when I was 21, but I got told we've moved on as if I was dead. So I afford them the same treatment. My life is great and I've never looked back. It feels amazing coming home to love and not yelling because I did something wrong. I don't care about reconciliation. I don't want to reconcile. I'm happily married and expecting our first child. I've finally made up for a miserable childhood. Haven't disappeared, but I tend to start a new life every few years. I get bored where I am and want something new and different. New places, new experiences, new people, new things to learn. I look for a new job, pack up, and move wherever it is, or someplace just to a new place without the job yet, but I prefer having the job lined up first. Sometimes overseas, sometimes within the same country, preferably overseas whenever the opportunity arises. Grew up moving ridiculously frequently and seeing a lot of different places. That stuck with me. I didn't totally disappear as I got legally emancipated at 16 and I moved to a new state 8 hours away from my home. I was gay and that wasn't chill with my super religious family. There was a small struggle for the first couple years as I did what 16-year-olds want to do and partied my butt off, sofa hopped. Landed on my feet eventually and now even have a relationship with family again more than a decade later. My parents divorced when I was 16. It was both of their second marriage after like 18 years or something. My mother, adoptive, nonetheless, became abusive as soon as my dad left the state, so I disappeared. I went to Atlanta, Georgia by myself. I took a taxi to New York City and took a cheap $40 Chinese bus ride down to Beaufort Highway and almost immediately found a job in tech repair. Was down there for 24 months before I moved to the same state as my dad. During those 2 years I didn't talk with anybody and my whole family. People were concerned. I didn't care. My brother went into the Navy when I was like 12 and became a juiced up meathead douche. My sister was always controlling and verbally abusive. I can't say I'd be sad if they were gone. I filed a restraining order against my mother after she kept harassing me over text, call, and email. Best decision I ever made. Not 100% disappear, but I got a new job 2,000 miles away and didn't tell my subordinates because I hated them. I just stopped coming to work one day. My co-workers and boss knew though. They had to figure it out eventually. Happens all the time where I work. One day Jimmy and then the next Sue just stopped coming. When I was engaged to my wife, my family didn't like that too much. My sisters didn't like her and said she was using me, and they had my mother on their side as well. We got married and I joined the Navy shortly thereafter and moved across the country and didn't speak to them. At first they still had my email and phone number and would try to contact me, but I didn't want to end up back in the recursive cycle of them scorning my wife. Now I'm living in another country and my wife and I couldn't be happier. I did it to escape the negativity. I was close to my family, but I guess I still kept myself emotionally distant. I think about it from time to time, but it feels so much better not having to be worried about outside opinions on my choices in life. Still in the Navy and my wife has a great job and takes care of me better than anyone else. Usually these types of stories involve the outside point of view that has a better bearing of the situation than the person who's in the middle of it. Glad to hear everything is working out. Used to be a druggy HP actress in my home country. Jumped at an opportunity to move in with a random guy who said I could stay with him in England and never went back. 8 years later I'm divorced to the random guy, but at 26 have an extremely lucky and amazing job. Worldwide travel in an awesome industry and get paid way more than I did as a H. And have an amazing network of friends. I have kept in contact with 2 friends from my previous life. Everyone else is gone. My family and I are very distant now with the very occasional phone call, twice a year, to my parents. My mom had Munchausen's by proxy and had me on psyche meds for 13 years growing up as a teen. She blamed the horrendous side effects on me being a bad kid and paraded me around as some sort of disaster. I took nursing and with my psychiatrist's help we figured out what's actually going on. I don't take meds anymore and I have a clean bill of health. My dad is the only one that believes me and treats me normal. Everyone else in my family is abusive and constantly spreading rumors and treating me like I am feeble-minded. In a little over a month I am moving 900 plus miles away. I had gone NC with my biological mother and anyone else that treats me this way. My dad divorced her. It's time to move on and do something with my life and I think I'd like to be in the medical field working against people with Munchausen's and cluster B disorders. One I can actually answer. I was in an abusive relationship with an ex. My life was a waking nightmare and after a particularly bad night, I realized that if I didn't get out, it would end up with me in the ground. But I had been beaten down. I was scared and I knew that even if I got away once, if he found me, I would go back. So I started preparing. I made up a fake job, opened up a secret bank account, bought a storage unit and started slowly moving things that were important to me. I didn't even tell my friends or family about my plan. In the end, even the best plans could go astray. He found out before I was ready and was on the war path, having tried to show up at a job that didn't exist. So I just grabbed my cats and ran. I stayed in a motel a few towns over and ended up sleeping on a stranger's couch for a month before moving into a more permanent place. I cut all contact with anyone that knew me before that point just because I was just both so scared and embarrassed. I ended up reconnecting with my mom but never really anyone else. I'm honestly not even sure what they think happened to me. I don't really regret my decision though. I moved away after being excommunicated from my home church. I'm currently 3,000 miles away from my family and no one knows what happened to me other than I am okay. Life is good so far. Learning to be an individual is rewarding. I cut off contact with all my friends when I realized that these people wouldn't even take the time to wish me happy birthday or just chat to see what's up. These are the type of friends that use you to get something out of you when it's convenient for them. They were all into a lot of drugs and I came to the realization that I may not want to be around them when crap goes sideways and that I just don't want to be involved with people who can't help themselves. So I just disappeared. Cut all social media contact, deleted my FB profile. Wasn't hard as they don't even bother to stay in contact unless they want something. Went back to school to get certified in a field that I actually like, with great job prospects and the opportunity to have a fantastic career, not just a job. Meanwhile all my other former dipshit friends are doing the same old, working the same dead-end jobs and still bitching how unfair life is. For me at least it felt like the decision was a no-brainer. I feel liberated that I don't have to walk on eggshells or pander to people's fragile egos. At the same time I don't get treated like crap or emotionally manipulated anymore. I assume I apply. Married 35 years. Found out my wife was in a 5-year affair with one of my friends. Was forced to sell everything I have ever worked for. House, sailboat, cars. Lost half of a 30-year pension. All I had left was a dream of living in Mexico. I had visited Mexico for 30 years and loved it there. Gave away all of my remaining possessions, except for a few that would fit into my Honda Element and began driving south. Told only a few close friends. Have made an entirely new life in central Mexico at 60 years old. Scary at first, but now after 5 months, feeling like home. Will be switching my 6-month tourist visa into a resident visa next month. No looking back. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.